Hi guys, this is Mrs. Gedicke. I am going to be talking about and showing you an example of a nonfiction reading strategy that I find helpful when reading digital texts, such as on Google Docs. Okay. Um, I know personally for me, reading stories, so like fiction or even nonfiction stories, um, I'm usually able to keep that in my brain a little bit better and to have a better memory of it, to understand it more easily. But with nonfiction texts, especially about science, social studies, probably a lot of the texts, the nonfiction texts that you're having to read in school, um, it can be really difficult for me to organize my thoughts or to know where to look back. So, this strategy is called text tagging. And basically, what we're going to be doing is we're making like little tags or labels for different sections of the text because then we know where to find information more easily and it kind of helps us to process some of the main ideas. This is really helpful in a text that doesn't have headings. Okay, so some texts that you'll read will have like a heading for each paragraph that would say, this is about pollination, this is about predators, etc. But this is really helpful when you don't necessarily have that. Okay, so basically, as you can see, I have already started this. We're not going to be reading this article called The Secret of the Orchid together in full. Um, so I've already started doing some of the work just to show you guys. Okay, I'm gonna move myself. Ooh, it's weird. Um, so what I've done after reading each paragraph, I go back and I usually just select the first word in each paragraph. I suppose you can select the whole thing, but that just kind of annoys me. So I select the first word in each paragraph and then I go and I type a comment. So you do that, by highlighting and then going over to a little plus. So we'll talk more about that later. Um, and then what I put in my comment is just what are the main details, or even if I had to write a heading almost for this paragraph, what would I put? So here, examples of orchids around the world. I also noticed that the examples were all super diverse. So this paragraph is telling me all the different ways that orchids can look, purposes, etc. Okay, if I scroll down, um, this article, after reading it, I had determined this was about the history, kind of when there were these orchid hunters who traveled the world and it was dangerous. If I click on my next tag, okay, this next paragraph gave me some actual examples of those dangers from the previous paragraph. The next paragraph after reading, I had said, oh, this paragraph focuses a lot on pollination. So self-pollinating versus birds or insects or wind helping to pollinate. Okay. So you kind of have seen what this looks like. And for me, it's pretty helpful because then as I'm reading, let's say I have to go back after I've initially read this, and I might have an assignment where I have to be able to find all this information to find text evidence or to answer a question or for a test. It's easier for me to skim along the side here down on all of my little tags or comments to find some of those keywords or ideas. And then when I click on it, I know a targeted area where I'm going to look in the text. Okay. So I'm going to show you how I do this on this paragraph starting here. So other orchids don't use their shape at all, but rather produce specialized scents to attract specific insects such as bees, beetles, or flies. Some orchids smell like cake, some like chocolate, and some like rotting meat. All these smells may seem weird or gross, but they exist to lure creatures to their pollen and help the orchids survive. The strategies to attract insects and spread their flowers' pollen go on and on. Each family of orchids has a unique kind of insect or bird that visits their flowers, as well as its own way of attracting them. It has worked too. According to Nova, a science television series on PBS, orchid species number more than 25,000 worldwide. That is more kinds of species than any other flower on the planet, and new ones are still being found. Wow. Okay. I picked this paragraph to show you with because there's a lot going on in it. So I might have multiple keywords. Okay. Um, the first idea that stood out to me is that orchids use unique, let's say, smells or scents to lure pollinators. That's very interesting. I want to know what a cake smelling orchid smells like. Um, then they talk about how the smells might seem weird or gross. The smells are there to lure in creatures to help them pollinate, which I already have. Each family of orchid has a unique kind of insect or bird. So each type has its own pollinator. That's interesting because I would have thought maybe just any old bird or bee or insect could go and pollinate any old flower. And then finally, this is a big idea we learned at the end. We don't need to say, like according to Nova, that's not the important tagging information that we need for this paragraph. What is important is this last statement here. There are more kinds of species than any other flower. That's a big deal. Okay. So now, if I were to do this whole thing, I would have some kind of key information off to the side to help me out, kind of to narrow down my focus so it's not so overwhelming to look at this huge page of text. I hope this helps you when you're doing your nonfiction reading for e-learning, and hang in there, stay healthy.